Hello, everyone. My name is Reem Abdulatif. I'm the co-founder of African Women Rights Advocates Movement. And joining me today for an episode of Reclaim the Narrative is Fieri Gezaheim. Fieri is pursuing a combined bachelor's degree in Canada. She's a human rights advocate, currently focusing on Tigray. She is also co-founder of Women of Tigray, an organization that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of girls and women. She's also founder of TY Calgary, a local city-based organization in Canada that aims to connect, empower, and educate Tigrayans, as well as advocate for their community. The Tigray crisis is appalling. It's left about 2.3 million children internally displaced and cut off from humanitarian aid, according to the UN. Fieri, perhaps you can tell us a little bit about how you became involved in the movement and what inspired you to start Women of Tigray.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. In terms of that matter, I actually started getting involved on Twitter, and that was based on a friend's recommendation to just get involved. Personally, for me, like who was raised in Canada, I did not have a lot of Tigrayans, like friends. So that was like my starting point. By being on Twitter, I got to see a lot of things that maybe I would not have been exposed to, including cultural and like just like small things that it's really hard to find anywhere else. In addition, there are honestly amazing, like credible people, just fascinating. They are like selfless. They are constantly working for Tigray and Tigrayans, and I was fortunate enough to get involved with them. Based on that, I met like a few friends who were interested in creating Women of Tigray, and that's how we started off.
Well, you guys are doing amazing work, and I think that's also how we connected. I know on African Women Rights Advocates, we're also focused heavily on the rights of women and girls. And as a survivor-led movement, we really try to pay very close attention to gender-based violence and sexualized violence. And sadly, that's that's been one of the issues that women and girls have been facing during this conflict. The conflict is now in its 8th month, roughly. It's also left about 5 million people in need of aid, of food, and around more than 350,000 of those people are living in famine conditions, according to the UN-backed estimates. Yet Ethiopia's prime minister has denied all of that. From your experience and your connections to women and people on the ground, why do you think that the facts behind the conflict are being obscured?
For me personally, the way myself and a lot of Tigrayans see is this is a hidden war. That's why communication was cut off. That's why medias were barred. International humanitarian aids were restricted, heavily restricted for several months. And still to this day, in many parts of Tigray, they're not allowed to go in there. Abiy Ahmed, who is the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, wants to eradicate Tigrayans. So they want to exterminate Tigrayans with the support of Eritrean forces, as well as like various regional militias, including in particular like Amhara. And their aim is to just quickly and silently destroy Tigray and just kill off every Tigrayans. However, their hopes and dreams were not fulfilled because, like you mentioned, we're approaching like a nearly 8 month mark, and Tigray is still like fighting. This
Well,
is a war.
sorry to cut you off, but maybe you can explain a bit to our network and our viewers, why do you believe that's the case? Why specifically target them? And you know, the UN has called it, I believe, ethnic cleansing. If not the UN, I know for sure the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Helen Clark, she's called it ethnic cleansing on multiple occasions. Why is that the case? Why are the people of Tigray being targeted?
Of course. So there are many nations, including like the states, who have called what is taking place in Tigray an ethnic cleansing, and it is not just necessarily the killing aspect of it, but also like a weaponized rape that's being used and a weaponized hunger to targetly like dismember Tigrayans. The reason being, this is not our first time for Tigrayans who are experiencing such circumstances. This is our third generational genocide. Tigrayans in general are known for fighting against dictatorship, and they never bow down to oppression. So for Abiy, who wants to maintain like a power, or he wants to have like an established ground where he can dictate everything and anything, Tigrayans are getting in his way. And that is like the main reason.
Okay. And okay, can you explain a little bit more about this? So how are they getting in his way? And what would you ask of the global community in order to be able to address what's happening?
Of course. So it's mainly his perception. It's how he views Tigrayans, because Tigrayans have fought in 2 other wars, the genocidal wars, and we were successful, of course, like with the help of like other Ethiopians, but we were successful in removing those obstacles. So for example, like the last time was the Dirk regime, and that claimed a life of 1.2 million Tigrayans due to a man-made hunger, which is what we're seeing. And so that was also something that had been done prior to that regime. However, Tigrayans, like the word Wayani itself, it also like the Ethiopians oftentimes try to use as an insult. It just means like the will to fight. You like never surrender. And for Abiy, who wishes to have an ultimatum, like just like a power where he can do anything, and for like Tigrayans who don't comply with him, he sees us as a threat.
But Tigrayans are also a minority, is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We are a minority. We are estimated to be about 6 million. And even within ourselves, we do have other minority groups, which are like Europe and Kunama.
Well, obviously the actions, the violence that's taking place against Tigrayans, there's no excuse for it. I just wanted you to express from your perspective why you think this is happening. Why do members of the Tigrayan community feel that they are being targeted? So thank you for expressing that. My next question, or the next point that I wanted to discuss, we're seeing limited global action, unfortunately, and very few politicians have spoken up about what's happening, with the exception of the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, who I mentioned earlier, Helen Clark. She's been very vocal about the issue on multiple occasions in international media. And we also saw Zimbabwean author Tsitsi Dangaramba, who was among signatories, along with Helen Clark, in 2 separate letters demanding international action to stop sexualized violence against women in Tigray. We've heard horrific details coming out in The Guardian and multiple media outlets in the BBC about how girls as young as 8 years old are being raped in the region, in the conflict. Can you talk to us a little bit about the facts that you've been working on, and the communication that you have with activists in the region?
Of course. So in terms of like why there's inaction, Linda Thomas Greenfield, who is a U.S. representative for UN, said it better than anybody else. She said, do Africans' life even matter? So although we had like the Black Lives Movement, it seems that when it comes to like African lives and when it actually comes to really putting a stop to atrocities, the world is slow. The international community is slow. Like you mentioned, there are horrific atrocities. Every international human rights has been broken, and it continues to be so. This is not a war on any military official. This is a war on the civilians themselves, with the aim being like to eradicate the Tigrayans and like just destroy Tigray. And there have also been several like video clips of like government officials who have made their desire known. And like, that's what I would call it, because they would like plain out like say, like we're 150 million, Tigray is only like a 5 million. Like it's okay to just like wipe them out. And like other statements. In terms of what is happening on the ground, there is still like limited like access to Tigray. Communication has been cut off since November 4th, and although some areas have been reconnected and we are able to speak with our family and like other volunteers, unfortunately the communication is never like permanent. It is temporary. So they can they cut it and then they put it and then they cut it. And that is not the only thing that they have cut. Of course, it's like water, electricity, and other human essentials, where even in times of conflict, it is a human right expectations that those rights are like protected, that there is access to water, that there is access to electricity and like basic foods, things that can help us, like that can help people survive. However, we see that in Tigray, that is not the case. And there are still many parts of Tigray where communication has not been restored since the November 3rd, when the state of emergency was declared by Abiy, and where we don't know what is truly happening, but we know there are foreign forces in there, and we know that there's land annexing, and we know there's atrocities happening throughout Tigray, where it is hard to even imagine, like for a human being, even like as a woman, like for me to just say, oh my God, like there's this type of atrocities taking place throughout Tigray, and we can see it, even so there's like limited communication. We can only imagine what kind of horror and how like horrible it is, like to what extent damage there's being sustained in areas where we cannot see, in areas where people are acting with like troops, like foreign troops, like Ethiopian troops and unarmed militias and special forces are acting with impunity, where they feel like they can do anything and get away with it. And that is what we're seeing as well.
And sadly, the limited global action is what allows them to act with impunity, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, we talk a lot about the facts and what's happening in the conflict. You mentioned earlier that, you feel like African women lives don't matter. How does that make you feel as a young, Black woman who you may not live in on the continent right now, you may not live in Tigray, but how does that make you feel in today's world?
Honestly, I was shocked initially, and the main being because I was like a big like Black Lives Matter proponent, and I was like an advocate for that up until like Tigray started. What we're seeing is it's not just that foreign individuals are not caring for Black Lives Matter or like for Black lives in general, but rather like Black people themselves do not care about that. What we're seeing with Tigray in particular is there are people who claim to be a human rights advocate, who claims to be about like women's rights, who claim to be a feminist and advocate against like sexual violence against women. We also see women that say like Black Lives Matter and who participate during protest time or help out in other ways. However, we see these people when it comes to Tigray, they justify what is taking place in Tigray. So it seems like only Black Lives Matter when it's like politically appealing, but not when it comes to putting it into practice. So as a woman, that makes me feel like there was never really a moment where Black Lives Matter did matter. It was just a movement that was popularized, and where people, rather than just actually participating from the goodness of their heart, they were there to just take pictures. And that did happen, actually. So that is what I'm witnessing at least.
Okay, but we are witnessing kind of a global awakening where more people are demanding their rights, and we're seeing it everywhere, whether it was the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States or the protests and Me Too movement that happened in countries like Egypt, in the Middle East and North Africa. How does, in your opinion, from what you've witnessed as an advocate in this movement, how does Tigray fit into all of this? Can you explain to us the importance of the Tigrayans, and again, why they are so heavily targeted? And like you said, it's not the first time.
Mm-hmm. So with the reason they're being targeted, it is like I stated earlier, it's mainly because we did not surrender to oppression. So just simply existing as Tigrayans for Abiy, this is a threat, who is working alongside Eritrea, who absolutely detests Tigrayans. Because of that, it only makes sense for him to remove the obstacle that he thinks exists and have his kingdom or whatever he desires. In terms of the moment, this entire situation was a true awakening for many people like myself, because we saw people that are advocating against other atrocities happening in every other countries, except when it's taking place in their own country. We see government officials, I'm talking about Ministry of Peace, Ministry of Women and Children, the president, there's so many women, for example, just in particular in Ethiopia, that have a government roles. But when we see the weaponized rape of innocent girls, like you mentioned, as young as 8, all the way to 80 years old, they choose to stay silent. So they choose to stay with the side with the oppressor, because after all, silence is an action. And the main reason I'm saying that is mainly since we have these people, these individuals who are claiming to be for justice, for rights, for human lives, for Black Lives Matter, for other lives. But when they have to put it into practice, they do not practice it. Do
you feel like maybe there's a certain level of kind of a gag rule from the state?
I'm sorry.
Is there a gag rule from the state to that intimidates them into being quiet? Obviously, they live there, and maybe they feel it would be dangerous. Maybe they've been threatened. Is this at all a possibility? Do you know of instances where activists or even just normal people have been asked to not mention what's happening?
So I would say, of course, lack of information was the biggest reason at the beginning. And that is something that Tigrayans were hoping was the reason. However, that was not the case, in particularly when it came to Ethiopians and Eritreans. The reason I say that is because this is not just people back home that are celebrating, that are cheering as women's, children's, and elders are dying, intentionally being killed and targeted just due to their ethnicity in Tigray. But this is people in foreign nations, people that are living outside of Ethiopia, who have access to information, who are aware of what is happening, but choosing to side with the oppressor. For example, in a recent BBC report, Abiy said there's no hunger in Tigray. This contradicts every other statement that was made by humanitarian organizations. And the reason I'm saying that is because this is not the first thing that he's denying. When we even look at the involvement of Eritrea, the government of Ethiopia has denied their presence numerous times. And then they said they were going to leave, but then they changed their mind and they said, okay, we're working together to resolve a problem in Tigray. They also claimed this entire war was over in November. I believe November 23rd or November 26th. And we are nearing like July, and we still do not see a halt to this genocide. So it's not that there is a lack of information or there is like a fear of repression, but rather they, like for a lot of people, this is something they wanted to see. And like even myself, like if, for example, like we had like a protest or anything and I was taking my flag with me, there would be like people, like for example, like recently there was a man who rolled up his window and just like, he was an elder man, but he rolled up his window and then he was screaming Junta. And that itself like really shows you like, okay, you're resorting to just insulting without really understanding the humanitarian aspect. At first, it makes sense if you want to deny it because there was lack of information and you didn't, like a lot of people were not aware of like what was happening. But then we have government officials and governments that are not only denying like the reality on the ground, but are also working to undermine what is happening. And the people are like pleased with what is happening to Tigray because they perceive us like as their enemy, or perhaps there's some other reason that I'm not aware of. But for a lot of people, they're taught like Tigrayans are their enemy, and what is happening, what we're seeing is TPLF, who's like a leader, like a legitimate leader in Tigray per the election, was like ruling Ethiopia alongside other like coalitions. It was in like EPRDF. So really it was not just TPLF ruling, it was like the entire EPRDF. However, we see people scapegoating TPLF who are like Tigrayans. And then we see that by painting TPLF as an evil objective, they are also painting the people of Tigray with such like ideology or like the such ink. Because of that, people associate for any fault that happened in Ethiopia within the last 27 years under EPRDF is caused and therefore should be blamed on TPLF. And since TPLF are Tigrayans, Tigray people have to be blamed for that. That is the type of mentality a lot of people unfortunately have.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the political situation, the sexualized violence that we've been hearing about, there's no excuse for that. There's absolutely no excuse for that. And I think it was US President Biden who a few weeks ago asked all violence, all parties to stop violence and the UN has also called on officials to stop attacking women. You know, if the international community fails to act on this situation, on this conflict, this could really undo the progress that women have made so far in eliminating sexual violence and conflict. This is very dangerous. And we know historically speaking that when minorities are targeted, first, you know, they target women to set an example for their communities and to scare people and to intimidate people into silence and basically, you know, to oppress them. And that's what we've witnessed throughout this whole conflict. Can you speak to us a little bit about the documented and confirmed instances of violence against women and girls that you've been able to document as an activist working with women of Tigray?
Of course. So you're absolutely right. There is no justification for atrocities. However, when like for some individuals, like what I have noticed is as long as they're not the victims, as long as they're not personally affected, they do not care. And for other people, they have so much hate that they do not care to sacrifice innocent civilians. And that is what we're witnessing is taking place.
This opens up the door to atrocities to be committed anywhere in Africa or even around the world. You know, when officials act with this kind of impunity against women, it sets a very dangerous precedent. president, and that's, you know, we know that we've witnessed that throughout history.
You
It's
are absolutely right.
appalling, really, and you know, I would like for you to describe some of the instances that you guys have documented, because Women of Tigray is doing amazing work, and you're almost single-handedly, you know, bringing attention to this. But also, I know it could be very traumatizing, and you know, it's a sensitive situation. So whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, please, you know, if you don't feel comfortable, also that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So, like you mentioned, there are many horrific stories coming from Tigray, and fortunately, we also see resistance. So far, there is 22,500 cases, like reports of women who are survivors of weaponized rape. And I say weaponized rape because there's a difference between weaponized rape and gender-based violence during peace times, whereas gender-based violence happens happens worldwide, and it is underreported. And you can only imagine with weaponized rape, which can be commanded, condemned, or condoned, is going to be even less reported. In Tigray in particular, the judicial system is broken. It's been destroyed. So women really don't have any places to turn to report their cases. That is like one issue that there exists. And with weaponized rape, it is strategic, it's systematic, and it is a calculated tool of war, which is used to target a specific ethnic group or commit a genocide. The main thing that we have witnessed in Tigray in particular is, as President Debretsion stated, when they rape like one woman, they are raping the community. This is not just like a simple act of rape, but rather like an attempt to crush and destroy the community of Tigray by attacking our women.
Well, it makes sense because women are the backbone of society.
Of course, yes.
And you really, this breaks a community.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. And the other reason is also because like when they're attacking a woman, they're also attacking like the culture and safety of the community, like you stated, by like creating a terror and by disrupting basic services, such as they did with the education, with like the healthcare, with the judicial system. Everything that a woman can try to turn on to, it's not available. This is a body politics. It's an attack directly, like equally against personal identity, but at the same time cultural integrity, with the main aim being like to control the socio-political process of like Tigray and just ultimately crippling it. So women are terrorized in a way where they can't even tell their community. Of course, that is not like what we're seeing in Tigray, but even during peacetime, like I stated, rape is underreported. And when you have such circumstances surrounding weaponized rape, women can't really report their cases. And we also saw like in a CNN report, when women have reported their cases, there are troops like Ethiopian, Amhara, and Eritrean troops with their gun, with their military outfit, that go into hospitals to tell them like don't report, who call and threaten them. So this isn't like just an attack of the immediate like act of it, but there's something that goes beyond it. So they want to make sure like whatever is happening in Tigray stays in Tigray. And there's also reports like of women being kidnapped again after reporting, and they were never returned.
So and we know in these communities in Africa, like you said, in normal instances, rape is underreported. Mm-hmm. Now, when you have this during a conflict and you know, sexual violence is being weaponized basically, and you live in a community where it's hard to report this anyway, you know, most of the societies in Africa are, you know, tribal. There's they're honor-based societies, you know, that's what I call them. I cannot imagine, you know, how difficult it is for these women and girls to not only report this, but sometimes in certain instances, some of them are being raped in front of their children and family members. What does this mean?
You're absolutely right. So this is, like, personally, it was really hard to even comprehend like the way, like their mentality. Like I can't really say I understand why they're doing what they're doing, or of course, like we understand like they have a reason for doing it, which is just to destroy Tigray through any means possible. And we understand that that method is by targeting the women and the girls, of course. But it's still like, as a human being and as a woman, it's hard to say, okay, yeah, I can see that happening. And for people to just cheer on such things and to deny that there are rapes happening is horrible, because when women go through something traumatic like this, they need people to say, okay, we believe you, we trust in like what you say, and provide them with the support that they need, be it like physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, everything. But we see our fellow the country people like Ethiopians and Eritreans saying no, there's no such thing, or they just say it's like we don't care. So in a lot of cases of rape, like weaponized rape in Tigray, what is happening is us, like the survivors, are being raped, some for as long as 11 days, some being tied, and like you mentioned, others being forced, like for children, like children that are young and their partners are forced to watch what is being done on the women in their household. In addition, family members are forced to have some type of sexual act with the other family member to show that like this is like mainly to exert like control, to show that like the troops have control over them and they can do like anything. And in a lot of instances, whenever a woman is being raped, they're told that their Tigrayan blood is being cleansed or that they're being Amharanized. We have cases where women are shot for resisting. A lot of them for being raped by groups of 6 to 16 guys. And oftentimes because of the violence, like the violent manner in which they're being raped, they end up having physical disability as well as like mental trauma from this. There are women that are unable to walk. There is a case of a woman where her womb was burned by a hot iron, and she was told that a Tigrayan woman should never give a birth to a Tigrayan.
Oh, this is very disturbing. Thank you for sharing this with us, but I'm also sorry that this is happening. I want to ask you if there was one thing that you would like to ask of the African Union.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What would that be?
Honestly, with the African Union, they have been complicit. They have like justified what is taking place, and they had also ignored the cases and the situation on the ground. And rather than like choosing to call out what is happening, they chose to side with oppressors. They, for example, I forgot his name, Mosek or something, of the African Union chairperson. He, for example, like I said, what is taking place in Tigray is justifiable. That itself, like, after hearing what is happening, makes you disheartened. Like, makes you wonder, okay, well, if Black people are not there for Black people, Africa is not there for Africa, then why would anybody think the world's going to be there for them? So that's kind of like, it's like a lot at some point in like throughout this whole genocide month, people have lost hope. People have lost hope on many people, like people they idolize, like feminist organizations or feminists. Even UN Women refused to sign a letter condemning like what was happening in Tigray. So if there are organizations that are in place for such things, that are expected to call out such atrocities, but they're choosing to stay silent and ignore it, then it makes you wonder, okay, that makes sense why nobody's acting, but then you also wonder, why is there such organization? Why are there people that claim to be advocates or feminists or like that are like in such positions, but are not using their positions to help the people that they're meant to help?
Well, like we said earlier, there's obviously no justification for the horrific things that are happening. Even prisoners who commit crimes and are behind bars do not deserve this kind of treatment. So, when I hear people saying, what did the people of Tigray do to deserve this? There is no justification for the amount of violence and the way that sex is being weaponized in Tigray. Thank you so much for being a voice, and thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing on an individual basis and also through Women of Tigray. And I think maybe one lesson that we've learned, the reason I asked about the African Union is because maybe one lesson that we've all learned over the past couple of years as we witness our continent and our regions in conflict is that we are in desperate need of new youth-led movements. And I really think that's what you're doing. This is what also AURA, what the African Women Rights Advocates Movement is all about. And we really appreciate the kind of work that you're doing. And, like you said earlier, it's selfless. So thank you for that.
Thank you for everything you do as well.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I just wanted to mention our men. So in a lot of times, whenever there is cases of rape, it seems like it's a woman's fight versus a man's fight. But what we're seeing in Tigray is it's a humanitarian fight. That's the first point. And because of that, this is not just women fighting. This is every Tigrayan, regardless of their gender, fighting for Tigrayans that are affected, be it women, children, elders, or anything. The reason I'm saying that is because this has been, it's not necessarily like being an ally, but they're shouldering the same pain as we are. Because whenever they see their women going through this, it's like they're basically being attacked. This is an attack on them as well. This is an attack on the whole Tigray. So this is a collective fight. And like in terms of like anything, I would say is there are, of course, many nations who have chose to call out what is happening. However, at the end of the day, wars can't save people. There's a lot of words that has been given, like lots of concerned statements, like gravely concerned or just like lots of statements, but at the end of the day, statements can't save people. The only thing that can save them is action. And we've seen that through the fact that we're in almost now 8 months of this genocide, where hunger is being weaponized and it is it's becoming exacerbated by the day. Rape, same thing. Like everything is worsening by the day. Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, as well as Amhara forces, they have been given chances to like cease hostility. They have been given chances, particularly for Eritrea, to withdraw from Tigray. However, they denied, and then they said they were going to withdraw, and then we still see more Eritrean troops going into Tigray and starting like a new killing or like raping or like other forms of atrocities. So like what we're witnessing in Tigray is a genocide where everything is being utilized to make sure that Tigrayans are completely rendered useless. But we are seeing resistance as well from Tigrayans. And what we also see is there are other Ethiopians or Eritreans who say like Tigrayans outside can't speak for Tigrayans in Tigray, and that they are closer to them than we are. But then a lot of the Ethiopians like abroad also say the same thing. And these are like our family, these are like our people. It's not like a matter of blood, but this is a fight like for Tigray and for Tigrayans, and just a fight for the right to survival. That's really what it is. So unless there is action taken by the international community and by individuals, because individuals have so much power. We all have like a power within us that we don't even realize. So it's like up to us like to use what we have and to make sure like leaders that are in positions do what they're meant to do.
You're absolutely right. You know, that's a very inspiring message that you just said. We have a power that we don't even realize. And it's not about our people, their people. This is a humanitarian cause. This is about humanity. If this is happening to anyone in Africa or anyone in the world, we each have a duty to speak up.
Absolutely.
And once again, thank you so much for being such a brilliant youth leader. You know, you're juggling 2 bachelor degrees, is that right? And you're also doing this advocacy work, and you know, it's really inspiring, and I really hope that other young people will be able to just follow in the footsteps and in the way that you're paving forward.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.